Welcome everybody to yet another fabulous episode of the KnobCast. Unfortunately, Yoshi and Mika are off on a camping trip in the Himalayas. That's right, they're camping up in the mountains, right on the mountain tops, so they're not going to be with us today. But that is of no consequence, since we have ourselves a lovely guest, Paticus Patrick Power.
Hey!
And he will be joining us for the entire show today. He is a musician and a big fan of philosophy, which I am as well. So we may be discussing topics along those lines. Well, actually, why don't you start by introducing yourself and maybe telling us a little bit about what you've been working on as of late?
Sure. So I play music, I play guitar, write songs, stuff like that. Lately, I just did a couple Christmas songs with my brother because I live with my brother. And so we've been jamming during lockdown. And what else? I did a classical guitar record this year that's up on Spotify and Apple Music and all that. So if you search Pat Power, that's me. I think I'm the only artist named Pat Power on Spotify. I'll have to check. There's someone named, there's Cat Power, there's Pat Powell, and there's Power Pat, who looks like, they're Thai. They're from Thailand, it looks like.
You should hook up with
Power
them,
Pat.
form like the clan of Power or something.
Yeah, their albums are called Power Pop and Power Pat, but looks like their last album was 2002, so...
Oh, they're out the running. You've claimed the crown of your own name.
Yeah. Yeah, Pat Power. So yeah, those have been my projects lately, and I've been trying to do like a little music video once a week for the past few months. Just to try a lot of things out without really committing to anything big, Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I don't know if the viewers, the millions of them watching know, but I actually worked on a few music videos with you back in ye old day.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, those are kind of nostalgic now, actually.
They're on the Verdana channel, right?
They're on my second channel.
Verdana Dose.
Yeah, or at least one of them's on my second channel, the Paperboy one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's still a couple like ones that we filmed that we never edited that I still think it'd be fun to go back to.
Oh yeah, we did like that one which was a bunch of photos, like a stop
that
motion.
That one and the classical guitar one at Christie Pitts.
Yeah, we gotta pick up the torch on that one that we put down.
And there was also the one we filmed in your garage, like the horror movie one. Remember?
That was a long time ago, but I do remember.
That was like the first thing we ever did, yeah. But we'll do more. We'll do more in the future. I mean, we probably would have done something this year if it wasn't for lockdown and everything,
Uh-huh. Well, you did make an appearance on my album, so that was something.
I did. And I guess we did make, that YouTube video for Verdana as well.
Oh yeah, you were in the Bullied by H3 one. I recall.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, but yeah, speaking of your album, have you talked about it on this show at all, or?
No, not really on this show. I've mentioned it in my YouTube videos, but yeah, I'd be down to talk about just like the process of creating and producing music, because it's quite a tumultuous process.
Why did you find it stressful at all, or?
I don't know if I found it stressful, but it definitely was at times annoying when there'd be something that I wanted to change, and then I'd change it, but then I realized that I made everything worse, so then I try to put it back how it was, but then I can't quite get it back to exactly how it used to sound. Or even worse when there's some specific thing in the mix that I don't like, so I tweak it a little bit. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. I give it a few days, I come back, I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? I have to keep changing it, and then change it again, and then I think that's good.
I know.
And I just keep exporting it and then listening to it and being like, nah, and then changing it over and over and over, and I spent all this time on this stupid little thing.
Yeah, I think that's always part of it, but it's especially hard when you're doing it all yourself and producing it yourself, and you're the producer and the performer. Like, anytime I've worked with a good producer, it's made everything so much easier. But at the same time, like, I like to just be able to work on things on my own schedule, and like, I'm never going to learn production unless I kind of agonize over doing it myself. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about for sure. Because you want to just keep working on it to get it done. But then at the same time, your ears kind of get tired and you stop being able to hear what's best. So you have to take a break. But
that's
then
the thing.
Taking a break, you get stressed because you're like, I just want to go back and finish it,
Yeah, there's an original cut of Pleasant Vibrations from like early 2020.
That's
like
the album,
spring.
you should say. Sorry to interrupt, but Pleasant Vibrations is the album.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't.
Just
if
so
for anyone
people
that
know.
doesn't that.
I mean,
but my album Pleasant Vibrations, there's an early version of it, which like it basically fell victim to like the syndrome of exactly what you're just describing. Like tired ear syndrome of like where I listened to it so much, and I made the horrible mistake of exporting the tracks so that I could like listen to them through my headphones like throughout the day, so I could be like, maybe I need to change this or whatever. But that was a terrible mistake because I ended up listening to my songs as I was developing them so much that like I liked them exactly how they were, and I didn't. It was hard for me to hear what could improve it because I'd heard it so many times. So.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I sort of got stuck in this like pit of thinking things that were like sounded really bad, like actually sounded good. And at one point, somehow something clicked, and I just kind of became aware of how many like horrible mistakes there were with the album that I was making, and I kind of got all disheartened, and I kind of dropped the project for a long time, and I only picked it up again around summer, and it had been months since I'd heard any of the songs, and suddenly like my ears were fresh again, and I could I could judge the songs again, and that's why I ended up finishing it at all.
So it's the fact that you took a break from it that let you come back with fresh ears.
Honestly, I think when developing music, taking a break and then coming back can be extremely beneficial.
Absolutely.
I think
you kind of have to build that into your process and plan for it as if it was just as important as the actual time you're sitting in front of the music working on it, Yeah,
because I think it's if you just hear the same thing over and over and over again, it's going to be hard for you to actually judge it.
Yeah, I remember. Have you ever listened to Hardcore History, the podcast?
No, I did listen to the history philosophy one you told me to listen to, but not Hardcore.
That one's dope. Yeah, Hardcore History is more.
Wait, actually, I might have. Hardcore? Did they do an episode about Japan?
Yeah, recently.
Oh, recently? Okay, well, a few years ago, I listened to some podcast which had this really long episode about Japan. I don't know if it was that one or a different one.
Well, it might have been actually because he does these huge 4 or 5 hour, thoroughly researched kind of mini audiobooks, and
then, no, I have heard it because you gave me a book by the dude who runs that podcast.
Yeah.
So no, I have heard Hardcore History. I just didn't remember what it was called.
It's an awesome success story of a podcast. Like, when did they start? I want to say 13 years ago. Like, so they were really early to the podcast game, and it's just Dan Carlin, the main dude, and he has a producer, and that's just it. And they've never, they've kept it really just in-house, and it's all fan-supported, so they just sell the episodes for $1, and I guess that they get by on that, and it's just so good if you're into history, and it's fucking awesome. But anyway, no, I just brought it up because Dan Carlin talks about this. I forget what interview it was, but he was saying, like, him and his producer work on it so much that they get to a point they can't tell what's good anymore, and they call it the blue room. And I forget what his solution for that was, but I just remember, I was like, oh damn, I know exactly what that is, that blue room thing, because you're working on it, and all of a sudden you're just like, I don't know, because any like you're making all of these small decisions, right? When you're creating something, and it's like all of these small decisions that add up to actually the creation of the thing.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And you get to a point where every decision becomes so hard and uncertain that you don't know if you're making it better or worse.
Yeah, exactly. Every single creative project, whether it be music or a video, is like, it's just the sum of all these tiny little decisions. Like you barely ever make a big decision. The only real big decisions are the ones you make at the very beginning, when you're like forming the backbone of it. And from that point on, when you're actually building it, it's just like one brick at a time. And theoretically, if just one brick is like missed, or you messed one tiny little thing up, that itself won't ultimately like matter that much or bring the whole project down, but you still need to take the time to make sure you get as many bricks right as possible, because if you just rush it because you're like, this little thing doesn't matter, then you'll do that with every little thing, and suddenly the whole thing will be sloppy.
Yep, it adds up.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. Every little thing you do adds up. I think especially in music though, because like with a YouTube video, there's more room for it to feel amateur than a song, where like if your song sounds amateur, then that's pretty damning.
Right. It is, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's something I've learned over time. Like, and that's something I was really impressed with your album, because
thank you.
You know, like when I was, if I could show you some of the stuff that I produced myself when I was your age, and like there's a lot of interesting stuff I did, but the level of production was a lot more amateurish and lo-fi. Like, I'm not sure what my thought process was, but I just liked the enjoyment of recording and just being super spontaneous, and then, finishing something in one day and then just moving on to the next thing. And I don't know, maybe part of that was because I was so into like classical guitar and stuff at the time. I didn't want to, I wanted to put all my time into that, so I didn't want to get too bogged down. But I think also I just didn't realize how much work it takes to really get something to sound super tight, and like no hum in the background, no extra little noises, and just really in tune. And it just sounds obvious now, but back then I was like, I just wanted to be creative and really spontaneous and get it done. And there's a lot of music that I like, especially back then, that is lo-fi and experimental and kind of like bedroom type music.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I'm just going to be one of those people, which is fine. But, if you just put a bit more work in to make your music sound more produced, you're making it more accessible to people, which, why wouldn't you want to do that? You can still make experimental weird music if you want, but just like, if you want people to enjoy it and listen to it, then yeah, you don't want it to sound amateurish.
And like, have you heard the Microphones / Mount Erie?
No.
It's one dude, so. But basically he makes music that's pretty simple, kind of has that like bedroom sound to it. Yeah. But he sort of does exactly what you were saying, where he still puts in the time to make sure it sounds kind of. He doesn't make it sound super like over polished, but he makes it sound finished. He makes it sound like a fully realized version of his songs, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole spectrum, right? Like something can kind of have a little bit of a lo-fi sheen to it, but still be really well produced.
Or a better
example
of that might actually be My Bloody Valentine, if you've heard them.
Oh yeah, what are you thinking of with them? I know
Loveless,
them better.
Mostly.
What about it?
Have you heard it?
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of
times. I taught you some of those songs on guitar back in the day, but like we never really got that deep into it.
And the thing with the album is it doesn't really sound like it because of its aesthetic, but it actually took like years and years of just doing stuff over and over again, because the creator was a perfectionist, or at least the producer, so he really wanted to.
Yeah, well, it definitely paid off, because that was like such a legendary album, Have you heard their album from a few years ago, like MBV?
I have not, actually. I probably should, though.
I think it's I'm just looking. It's not on Spotify, which is weird. But
yeah, I'm generally restrained by if it's on Spotify or not.
I'm not sure where you'd find it. I mean, but yeah, I mean, it's the only Loveless was 91, and it was obviously like one of the best albums of the 90s. But you know, lots of people would say. I think.
Yeah, I think
especially
that's
for rock music.
Pretty prevailing opinion.
Yeah,
what was it with
MBV
1991 with like
good.
all these hugely influential albums that came out that year that changed rock?
I don't know. Like, I don't have that encyclopedic knowledge, but I bet if you did, there'd probably be a bunch in almost every year. But I bet you're thinking of like Nevermind.
Well,
right?
yeah, I was also thinking Nevermind. I mean, oh yeah, Out of Time by Rem came out that year too.
Oh, okay, what's on that one?
Like, I believe Losing My Religion is on that one.
Oh, really? Okay. But that year is the year of the Metallica Black Album too, isn't it? 91.
I think so. Yeah, it is.
It's also the year of the first Smashing Pumpkins album, Gish, which wasn't a huge, like, that wasn't their big breakthrough, but it's a fucking sweet album, and I love that band. At least the 90s incarnation.
I think Pulp might have started in 91 too, actually.
Pulp? Is that a band?
Oh no, what's the band that I'm thinking of? Oh no, I'm an idiot. I meant to say Blur. Why did I say Pulp?
Blur. Oh, interesting.
Oh no, I'm getting confused because Pulp is a different Britpop band. Sorry. Pulp is a more obscure Britpop band, but Blur is who I was thinking of.
Interesting.
Actually, when was
I'm
Blur's
looking at
first
the
album,
wiki page, 1991 in music.
Yeah, there was. I mean, it was a huge. They're just those standout years, like 1967, I'd say. 1969. Also, there's two pretty close to each other. Then I'd also argue 1971. So those are all quite close.
Yeah.
And then 1991. I'd say 2009 was a pretty big year too. There's a lot of big stuff.
Interesting. Don't you think though that like if you really went deep and listened to just like everything in a certain year, you'd realize that every year has
at least
stuff.
one huge project. But
which is
I
just
think
like
those
the miracle
years,
of music.
just for like whatever coincidental reason, like just
right.
a larger amount
out.
of huge albums ended up coming out those years than usual.
That's fair. Crash Test Dummies, 1991. They're a pretty cool band.
I might change 2009 to 2010 actually.
Yeah, that's interesting. Why? What do you?
Well, 2010 was like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which is many people like. A lot of people still consider the best album of all time. Personally, it's not even my favorite Kanye album, but I still think it was an insanely huge, influential album. That's the year that
it's great.
That's the year that the biggest, or at least most popular, LCD Sound System album came out. I think that was a pretty...
Oh, which one's that?
That's the one that...
Not Sound of Silver, right?
Sorry?
It's not Sound of Silver. That was the one before that, wasn't it?
No, it's
This Is
it's
Happening?
called This Is Happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never really got into that one.
Oh, that also has a... That's also when Tame Impala started up. 2010.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Uh-huh. And Plastic Beach too. So like, thank you.
Plastic Beach was a good one. Yeah, I remember listening to that. Oh, Green Day's first album was 1991.
Ooh, what's your opinion of Green Day?
I like them a lot. Like especially like the Dookie stuff, but even some of the more modern stuff is good. Like, I'm constantly impressed by bands like that are able to kind of reinvent themselves with the times, you know, and like have huge pop hits. Like they started out as like this alt punk kind of 90s band and then they did that so well, and then in the 2000s they kind of rebranded as like a pop stadium rock kind of band, you know. Felt like, and that's just, you know, good for them. Like they've been able to keep it going, you know, and kind of like cross the generations, which a lot of bands just can't do that.
Well, personally, I think I have a different take than you on Green Day, because my opinion of them has really tanked. I think that their post 2010 stuff has really fallen flat on its face, in my opinion at least. Especially their newest album, Father of All Motherfuckers.
That sounded lame. Yeah, I
It's
mean,
really,
no,
really,
you're totally
really
right
lame.
about that. Yeah,
Like, I think they were able to like bridge the gap between sort of newer and less mainstream ideas with the mainstream. Like, they were able to popify it like pretty decently for a while. But since I'd say something like 2010, sometime around there, they've kind of lost their touch. And they sort of market.
Oh, for sure.
Have you seen the way that they marketed their new album?
No.
Oh, because it's pretty funny, I'd say. Because I'm gonna read out to you the signs that they put up. It said, no features, no Swedish songwriters, no trap beats, 100% pure uncut rock.
Swedish songwriters.
Yeah, they're bragging that they don't like use, so like they don't fly in songwriters. They do it all themselves. They're big boys. Yeah, it's and that album, I really can't stand that album because it's so they advertise as if like they're delivering pure uncut rock, and they're like not conforming to like pop standards, and then they deliver this super like sugary poppy like rock album. Like
yeah, totally. Well, I think that's all just marketing, you know. They probably have a focus group and which tells them to say that kind of thing, and then they just say that kind of thing. I mean, you know what I mean? Like I'm just guessing, but yeah, I mean, like their Dookie stuff is amazing. If you go back to that Dookie album, so good. Just so good.
Yeah, they definitely have high points. They definitely have points that will be looked back at positively. I can't get behind any of their new stuff personally.
No, same.
That's not super uncommon. I'd say Green Day's one of my personally one of the most extreme examples in terms of a band who kind of fell off. But I think it's not uncommon for bands that were once held in super high regard to sort of like overstay their welcome and kind of.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with anything is just whether it's athletes or musicians, artists.
Or a TV show or whatever.
Just anything, yeah. Like, you know.
It can kind of lose its good reputation once it sort of runs out of ideas and keeps carrying on.
I mean, anything that's the best doesn't stay the best forever, just due to, you know, impermanence.
The thing is, with a TV show, I feel like it's absolutely inevitable, except for the rarest of cases, because
they
like a TV show has set characters and like a set amount of like satisfying stories you can do with those characters and like the setting of the show. And once you've kind of gone for long enough, you kind of start to you're forced to up the ante, like one up yourself to make it still feel interesting. But then you kind of fall down a pit where the show sort of it's starting to try to one up itself so hard that it's kind of losing its groundedness, and the characters are getting flanderized, and again you're sort of starting to repeat yourself. Like I think a good example of that is The Office, where like it's pretty slice of life in like season 1, and by the time you get to season like 9, it's this like super like unrealistic, like sort of over the top like magic realism show, which still has like the handheld camera work style, but like everything that's happening is like super outlandish.
Yeah, things can kind of become just a parody of themselves, you know? And it's like, I find that a lot with TV stuff, is like they set you up like it's going to be this great show, and maybe it is for a bit, but then this probably isn't what happens, but I just picture the writers being like, well, they're invested in the characters now, so we can just kind of do whatever. Like, people are just going to watch it because they want to see what happens to the characters, and they like the characters, but, you know, it doesn't really have to be good anymore. Like, it seems like that kind of thing happens all the time with TV.
You just described The Simpsons and Family Guy at the same time.
And just probably lots of things.
And a lot of, well, those are the things that came into my head for, like, the show, especially The Simpsons. The show's been on for forever. Yeah. I think that the only show I can think of that has somehow defied the odds and managed to stay good, and there's more than just this one, but this is the one that came to my mind, is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which just somehow just through sheer good writers it definitely has still fallen victim to like one-upping itself, and the episodes are definitely more extreme, or at least you could actually argue that the edge has kind of been taken off the show a little bit, but I guess the stakes are higher and the stuff that's happening is a little bit more outlandish, I guess I could say, now than in the early seasons, but it's still good. That's the thing. They managed to hold on to the quality.
I never really got into that one. It seems good though, but I just haven't seen a lot of different shows, you know. So I've seen some, but haven't really got into that one. I've heard it's great though.
No, it is. It's worth. You should watch it. It's my favorite sitcom by a long shot.
Is it still going, or?
It is. Yeah, it's been going since 2005.
Oh wow, that's a long time.
Super impressive.
That's a really long time.
Yeah. Well, like, the thing about music is, I think, unlike with a TV show, a musician, it's while they do fall off still, like, a lot, like, it's easier to maintain a music career because it's not like one story with one like set of characters. It's
right.
Any album you can do can be its own thing. You can totally change your direction. So for example, like someone like Paul Simon, I think he hasn't really ever lost it. That I can think of.
No, that's a great example.
David Bowie's another good example too. I think he really managed to hold on to the quality, and even what's impressive about him is the last album he ever made, Black Star, is actually one of my favorite albums of his. Like even considering like taking into account like his golden age, that album still beats out a lot of his albums that he released in his prime. So he really
for sure
didn't fall off.
No, I think that's a great example, and I think there's a few things that go into that would apply to other groups as well. Like he would constantly reinvent himself, you know, maybe like he was always a songwriter and a singer, but he would invent new characters. He would switch the style a little bit. He would like wear different clothes, get different haircuts. Like he was always kind of reinventing himself. And he clearly just took it seriously and was a great songwriter and a genius. So like he was just always applying himself to it in that way, and he never went on cruise control, you know. Another good one is like Radiohead, you know.
Oh yeah, Tom York and the gang. Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, they managed to keep the good albums coming as well. Yeah, so like with music, it's a lot more common than I'd also argue for David Byrne. I think he's managed to make some pretty good stuff quite recently.
You know what? I know you're into Talking Heads. I see you listening to them on Spotify, but I'm not a huge fan these days of like David Byrne and the Talking Heads.
Really?
Got to be honest. Yeah,
Why?
I used to like them. I don't know why. I'm just like, he doesn't really sing. He's just like,
he sings. I mean, what albums have you heard? Especially on the later Talking Heads albums, like he's basically just singing normally on those later ones.
Is he?
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard them.
I need to do some more listening.
Yeah,
for sure.
Talking Heads are for me like they're like my Bible.
Oh wow, the Bible is my Bible.
That's a good segue into philosophy, actually, and political philosophy and theological philosophy, or whatever we're going to talk about. What books have you been reading as of late that sort of delve into those themes?
Well, a couple. What do I have over here? A big one that I read this year was this compilation of Christian mysticism. Which is great. It's like just Christian mystic stuff. It's grouped by subject, so you get like, you know, each section of the book has excerpts from things from, you know, like 2,000 years ago, 100 years ago, and everything in between, you know. So that was good. Book on like a book of Zen koans, which is pretty cool. Just stuff like that. The Tao Te Ching, I found like my old copy of that, and I just kind of read it a little bit, and I'm like, this is some good shit. This is good shit. This is what I need.
There's always a book that kind of it feels like it's opening your mind when you're reading it, and you feel enlightened.
Yeah, that's exactly. That's why I mostly read that kind of stuff, because I like reading everything, but life's short. You can only read so many books, right? So I like to read the things that I feel like are actually important, and novels are great, stuff like that's great, but like kind of mysticism, spiritual writings, that's the stuff that I think's actually important. So to me, if I just read that kind of stuff for the rest of my life, like
you'd be happy.
Would be, fine. I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, recently I've been reading more sort of just snippets of like philosophical texts and such. So I'm getting all these like little tastes of it, and it's quite interesting, especially the stuff from ancient Greece, like not just Plato and Aristotle, but all those other philosophers from that time. There are just a fuck ton of them. There's so many.
My favorite is I always think Hippocrates, but it's not. He's the doctor. Who's the other guy? Heraclitus.
Should I just name a bunch? Should I just name a bunch of them? Like the philosophers,
sure,
and we can just
ahead.
talk about them. All right, so
sure.
Generally, who's the person that's considered the first philosopher by many historians is Thales.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's the dude that thought that everything is derived from water. Water is like the base substance of the universe. Which
that's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. It sounds like a weird ass take. Probably to just if you just mention that to someone, they'd probably be confused by it. But when you think about it, he has this explanation that like kind of makes sense. Where like he argues that water is what nurtures everything. Like humans need water, plants need water. Water seems to nurture everything, and there's kind of like moisture within everything, which is true technically. So, or at least every like physical substance. Obviously not like I don't think there's moisture within dark matter or whatever the fuck. But that was a little ahead of his time. But anyways, like his arguments are like pretty interesting, and I think he also saw water as sort of the middle ground between like solids and like gas, or I guess it was referred to as air back then, not gas, but like water. Yeah, that's just he sort of saw water as being like the base matter of existence.
Yeah, and I like those really early philosophers are interesting just to see what is known about them, but then at the same time I kind of skip ahead a little bit myself to say like Heraclitus, because Heraclitus has these things you can actually read, whereas someone like Thales, it's just kind of what people said that he said. There's not really a lot of good data on it. I mean, but when you look at sorry, go ahead.
No, you finish.
Oh, well, and the other thing about Heraclitus I really like is he's just very cryptic and very mystic. Like he's one of those Western philosophers where you read them and you just feel like you're reading like some Buddhist or like Taoist scripture. It just seems very mystical and very deep. And very cryptic and very short, so it's like easy to read, which I like. And then like him and like Parmenides and Pythagoras are, to me, were like, or when I was reading about it, I'm not like big on this stuff, so I'm not your guide to like teach you about it or anything if you're listening to this. But they're the most interesting. Am I missing anyone?
Well,
those three.
There's like I don't know how familiar you are with Diogenes. He's one of the.
Oh yeah, he's cool.
He was like he was a big like he was a big contrarian. He was one of the first edgy philosophers.
Yeah, he was a cynic.
Yeah,
philosopher.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. And then,
there's some great paintings of him like in his barrel, because they say he lived in a barrel. And
What a
like
Chad.
there's a couple I saw recently, one where like these dogs are coming up to him and like chilling with him, and then another one where there's like these young girls passing by and they're like waving to him, like saying hi, like, oh look, it's crazy old Diogenes and stuff. And I was like, yeah, it's showing what he's leaving up, you know, passing up by living in a barrel.
Diogenes
like
got bullied. That's
yeah. Yeah. Well, he's definitely not getting laid in that barrel, you know. So.
Oh, speaking
not
of,
by
I almost forgot to say something about Thales, but he kind of got bullied too, but he absolutely dabbed on all of his haters by like basically people would call him poor, so he literally just bought a bunch of like he purchased a bunch of like olive tree seeds, and he just like basically created a plantation of olive trees, and then he sold a shit ton of olive oil and like created a monopoly and got like super rich temporarily just to flex and prove that he could do it. But then he like, I'm pretty sure he gave away his money and went back to being poor because he had like no interest in being rich.
Interesting.
It just didn't suit
well,
him.
the one I like how it's like these little mythical stories, which is pretty fun with these old philosophers. But another one that I heard about him was that, you know, somebody said, oh, he's crazy. Like, you know, I saw him just like chilling at the bottom of a well the other day. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that does seem like a pretty crazy thing to do. But then some modern commentator was saying, like, if you go to the bottom of a well, you can look up at the stars and like see them more clearly because the light's being like filtered down into the well or something. So like something like that. So you know, the moral is like what looks crazy from one side of things
is beautiful
actually,
from the other side.
Yeah, it's like it's beautiful. Like once you have the proper understanding and you can see something that maybe not everybody else is seeing, then it makes perfect sense. Like it's the only thing that makes sense, you know.
That's actually like a pretty good like visual metaphor too. Like it looks like he's at the bottom of a well of insanity, but he's actually getting the ray of light straight from the sky.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which, you know, lots of like mystics and spiritual people seem crazy. Or are crazy by like everyday definitions of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's always some insanity in a genius. Mm-hmm. But like, how much do you know about? If we fast forward a little bit, let me just think. Who's interesting? What about Anaxagoras?
He was one of those ones. There's not a lot of stuff on him, right?
No, there's like a decent amount. I don't know if there's that much, but like there's a little decent amount of stuff on him, I'd say. Like he believed that there was a property referred to as nous, which kind of it was essentially the intelligence through which the universe operates. It's kind of like a little bit difficult to explain, but basically that the universe can't have assembled itself into the coherent form it's in without some kind of intelligence guiding it. So it's
basically like God.
Well, kind of, but it's also a little bit different because it's not like a sentient being. It's not like a god, and rather it's just sort of the property of intelligence itself, which sort of rawly exists within matter and within us. And it sort of guides the universe, but it's not like a god. It's not like a being.
Sure.
And that,
it's like I get it. Yeah, okay.
That was actually kind of picked up by Plato later on with he sort of, I don't know if you're aware of Timaeus.
Yeah, the dialogue, right?
Yeah, but he basically outlines a creation story for the universe in that book, and it's very, very detailed. I mean, I'm not gonna say that it's accurate, but like, technically it could be. I doubt it, but like we still don't know where the universe came from. But like
but it's basically a creation myth.
There's so much thought that went into his theories for where the universe came from, and without like getting too deeply into it, nous, or the concept of intelligence behind everything, is kind of factored into his theory, and he actually included gods within. I think he was one of the earlier, or one of the first philosophers to actually factor gods into his creation story.
Interesting.
And so he kind of he saw the human soul as being divided into three sort of main areas, those being reason, spirit, and appetite. I remember. And it's almost a little bit similar to like ego, superego, and id a little bit. Like that's sort of the modern day theory, whereas like id would be appetite, ego would be like spirit, and like superego would be reason. Yeah, and reason was kind of similar to what Anaxagoras saw as being nous.
Interesting. And what are you... How far are you with this Greek philosophy stuff? Like, have you basically gone up to Plato and Aristotle, or?
I've gone through all the ancient Greek stuff.
Have you got into any of the AD stuff, like Plotinus or?
Oh no, sorry. I guess you're. So no, I haven't made to the AD stuff, but I've like basically up to like Aristotle.
That's cool. That's great. Yeah. I really like Plotinus. Like he's what you would call a Neoplatonic philosopher. And he kind of his stuff is very Platonic. Like it sounds a lot like what you were just describing. And he kind of frames it as you have this thing called the One, which is basically like God. And then there's basically creation, and everything that's not that comes into being like through a process of emanation. So it's like you have the One, and then the One like emanates just a little bit, and that creates, I'm just kind of improvising this, but let's say that makes the heavens, and then the heavens emanate, and then that creates like these spirits, and then there's like this process of emanation until you get to like actual matter and us. So there's that. So
that's kind of interesting in that kind of sounds, well, it wasn't the same thing as, it sort of was vaguely touching upon humans being created in God's image, which was sort of picked up by a lot of religions in the Western world.
Yeah, totally.
After that, Abrahamic
religions,
it was
picked up by them, but I think the thing is though, like a lot of these ideas have probably been around forever.
Yeah.
Way before philosophy, but
I think humans
it's just we don't have the records of that.
Humans have always tended to just think of God as looking like a person, specifically like a dude with a beard.
No, I don't think they have, man. Like I think if you really get deep into people who think about religion, especially in ancient times, they have a much more like subtle conception of God than that, which I think goes back, indefinitely into history.
Well, no, I've definitely read up on philosophers, like a lot of the ancient Greek philosophers who kind of, did have a very sort of subtle idea of God, whereas he wasn't like a person, but he was a little bit more of an abstract concept that it's a little bit more difficult for us to understand, and it was a little bit more difficult for them to explain. And with like with Plato, even he sort of framed God as something that we can't fully understand, but he exists like outside of time, kind of.
Yeah.
One thing, just getting back to Plato's Timaeus really quickly, there are certain things that he said were surprisingly ahead of their time in terms of like like for example, with how he explained human vision. He explained it as like beams of light enter the human eye and are like interpreted, and that's sort of how we get the vision. And that is surprisingly accurate for something thousands of years ago. Whereas people back then probably would have just seen it as your eyes are like just sort of, obviously they didn't know of cameras, but they probably think of it similar to how we think of cameras, where it just be like, it sort of just captures what's in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And they probably
think
would have seen light as like an on-off thing too, not like something that's split into beams the way Plato saw it.
I think the ancient theory of how the eyes worked, I've heard this, is like they thought our eyes sent out beams to see things, so they kind of had it backwards. So Plato probably just
that might actually Plato might have actually but Plato actually may have had something about the eyes sending out beams as well. I'm not 100%. It definitely had to do with beams entering the eye. I don't remember if the eye sends out the beams first and they come back into the eye.
Right. But it's a scientific way of thinking.
Yeah,
basically.
But it's still interesting. Yeah. It was still unique.
Yeah.
And like
But no, for sure. I think the ancients were a lot smarter than we give them credit for.
Yeah. I mean, humans. It's not like, I think a lot of people, when they think about thousands of years ago, they kind of just imagine like humans as being super like stupid compared to now. And the thing is,
but not at
humans
all.
have always been the same intelligence. So it's weird to think.
Yeah.
If you go back to this time, like people just like biologically were the same, like just as smart as us now. They just lived in a far more primitive culture with far more primitive technology.
Yeah. And so I wanted to tie that back into, not to like harp on this point, but the God thing. Like, I used to think that most people, when they talk about God, we're talking about like some guy in the sky, like old man with a beard, whatever. But the more you read about it, even in the Bible, but like, any philosopher, and like you're going to get deep into this when you start reading, like you're going to hit all of these kind of figures in the AD era that are kind of Greek philosophers, but also Christians. So they kind of like fuse the two. And you read them, or you read, I don't know, any Jewish mysticism or just anything like that. They have a really interesting philosophical, subtle concept of God, and like it's my feeling that goes back, as long as humans have had the same intelligence that they have now, and they've been able to think about this. Like there's been shaman, and there's been priests, and these kind of people, prophets. There's my dog. There's my puppy.
When I said that I thought a lot of people interpreted God as a sort of a dude with a white beard, I didn't really necessarily mean that he's depicted as that in theocratic texts as much, or that like philosophers have thought of him that way, but the general public tends to depict him that way, I think, which can just be evidenced by paintings and such. That's what I meant. People just naturally tend to see God as being that, which I meant. And Plato sort of, I think I was talking about Timaeus at the time. I was saying he like didn't see it as that, and many of the Greek philosophers BC or AD didn't really seem to.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing.
Yeah, there's like
that's the thing about all the Abrahamic religions in general. Whereas I think the text sort of portrays the gods God as being sort of a difficult to understand concept, but when people depict God, whether it be Christianity or Judaism or Islam, the depictions of God generally still just sort of look like a dude, who like shows emotion. Maybe he's like angry or whatever, even though God would most likely be beyond like anger or whatever based on those texts.
Yeah. I feel like that's the the surface level, and but I would just suggest, I can't prove this, but I would suggest that the deeper idea of God as being kind of beyond something like anger might be more common than you think. I'm not saying that a lot of people don't just see God as like very anthropomorphic, which they do, but just that, because it is such a hard thing to put into words and to explain, the people who know or have some kind of knowledge of the more mystical way of knowing God, the more philosophical way. It's not like they're out spreading these ideas around because it's just really hard to spread those ideas around because they don't really make sense logically because it's just this special category. So, but yeah, to me, that kind of thing is, like they say, philosophy is the handmaiden of theology. It's like, to me, that's when philosophy is the most interesting, when it's like talking about God. I mean, metaphysics is cool. It's all interesting. It's all cool, but it's like, I mean, metaphysics. It's like the knowledge that's hidden in plain sight, basically.
Yeah, metaphysics kind of ties into the idea of the creation of the universe too, and like how everything works.
Yep.
And I think that plays a big part in religion too. I mean, honestly, on the topic of God, like I myself, I'll say I have no idea if I think a God exists or not, or at least in the traditional sense of how we think about a God. But if there is a God, which I'm open to the idea of, I do not think that they'd be, as you described, anthropomorphic or human-like at all. Because that just, something human-like would be too inherently flawed to be God. Right. If that makes sense.
That is a great point, and that's like really a good setup for, Christianity, because it's all, it's Boxing Day, right? So Christmas. And
as of recording this, yes. I don't know when this will go up.
Yeah, as we're recording this. And so that's the whole idea of Jesus, right? Is like God, I think they say in the Eastern Orthodox, like emptied himself and became human into like this sinful, imperfect world out of love, So maybe it's not the fact that God is like us, but he can choose to, he has a vested interest and love for humanity because we're created in some kind of his image. So,
well, that's the thing. I think God himself couldn't experience like human emotion, because human emotions take place within time. They take place, within a being that sort of moves forward in time. Like you're angry because of something that happened previously, and then you sort of get over it, or whatever. But God, if God exists, since God would exist outside of time, I think that's generally sort of would be an accepted idea for how God exists, or at the very least, infinitely. Like not like for a finite time. Emotion just like would not compute with a God like that, especially in like religions like Christianity, where being angry is a sin. That would just be an oxymoron for God to feel negative emotions like that, or something like sadness, or like
but that's the whole genius of Christianity, is like God became human so he could relate to us on that level. He became human so that humans would never have to say, oh, God would never get this like pain and suffering because he's so far above us. And that would have kind of felt true, because you think about God a lot and you start to realize what a subtle, difficult to grasp concept it is, and you're like, you start to realize like, oh, God doesn't get what I'm going through because he's eternal and infinite and all that. But then if you believe in Jesus, like that solves that problem, because you're like, oh, God literally is a person, at least this one aspect of the Trinity. So God understands like everything, because he, God felt like he had to be able to say to humanity, I understand what you're going through. And the only way he could do that is by showing, he's been through it himself. So that's like the unique kind of twist on that Christianity gives you, That's something I've always found interesting about the concept of the whole Holy Trinity in Christianity. Again, even though I myself may not like call myself a Christian, just the idea of God sort of mirroring himself into a human who sort of does exist limited within time and within a human body, and on the other hand, the Holy Spirit sort of being the other end of the spectrum, whereas the Holy Spirit just exists invisibly, sort of
within everything is the idea, I believe. And God is almost kind of both at once, kind of, a little bit. I believe that's the idea. I've always found that interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the Holy Spirit is a weird one, because it just kind of, like, the way you put it is interesting, and I wouldn't say it's inaccurate. No, like it is interesting to me. It's like the Jesus aspect of the Trinity is what I was just saying. It's like God becoming human so he can relate to us and we can relate to him, right? But it's and then the Father kind of covers the abstract, kind of unknowable, unseeable, untouchable, kind of like super refined ultimate reality kind of thing. And then the Holy Spirit is more like just kind of this, see, I don't fully get it, but to me it's all of these different things, you know. It's like it's kind of just this animating force like through the universe or something, you know. It's like consciousness, or it's like beauty and like human life and just, it's all of these different things. It's but I don't know. I feel like I don't quite understand that part of it as well, but the other two I feel like I do, at least in some way.
Like what I was talking about with Noose earlier, I think it's actually not uncommon for stories of how the universe came to be to involve this kind of difficult to describe entity which kind of exists. Even in Star Wars, like there's the Force. There's like always this force that sort of exists, tying everything together. You know, Star Wars actually has a pretty interesting theology behind it. Even though it's just a series of movies, there's some, George Lucas got pretty interesting with it until he decided that like midichlorians are what creates the Force or whatever.
Well, I think he was reading Joseph Campbell when he wrote Star Wars, right? The hero with 1,000 faces. So it's like pretty archetypal, mythical kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the original Star Wars movies, if you watch them, like, they're actually, they're a lot lighter on the ideological stuff than I remembered when I rewatched them recently. They're more just sort of like hero's journey, like fantasy type stuff. Totally. And then the prequels are sort of like the world building movies.
Yeah.
And apart from like midichlorians and Jar Jar and whatever, I'm actually I'm pretty interested in a lot of stuff that it adds to the universe. It's not as much spending on like the theological or ideological ideas behind the Force. That stuff mostly actually exists in like texts outside of the movies. Right, you kind of get a little bit of a hint of it from like Obi-Wan talking about it in New Hope, but like the prequels are more just sort of about expanding like the culture and like politics and stuff of the world.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
The sequels are just do nothing. They just do,
oh yeah, they're pretty bad.
They do fuck all.
What do you expect though with it's like Disney? Like it went from being this one renegade genius's like life's work to being fucking Disney. It's like it's not gonna be. How can it be?
That's what happens to creativity. Like, welcome to like a modern capitalist society of entertainment where like everything, even if it starts in one person's idea, like the creator, it sort of travels up the chain until it makes it to like the corporate conglomerate who sees no use out of it except money, so they just milk it for all it's worth. And there's so many properties, so many movies, so many shows that like had potential to be super interesting and just great, and they just got neutered by these dumb dipshit producers who don't even know what they're doing, but they managed to get where they are through like being businessmen, not through being creators. So they basically just try to follow the graph of what is apparently successful, and it's such a killer of creativity. And with Star Wars, it's like they didn't even fucking plan out the new trilogy. Like, I'm not even joking. They didn't plan it out before they started making it, because their plan was basically just to use the reception, I think, this is my theory, as almost like a big scale, like test screen almost to see what people liked and what people didn't like, and then they would build upon what people said they liked in Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. And they ended up giving it to Rian Johnson, and I think they thought, based off like shows like Game of Thrones and based off the stuff that was viewed to be subversive that people liked, like such as Han dying in The Force Awakens, they're like, let's double down, let's make The Last Jedi where like it subverts your expectations and it's like so unexpected. And then they made this pile of fucking dog shit movie, which like, and I actually like Rian Johnson is the weirdest part. Like I like most of his movies. I like Knives Out a lot.
Oh man, Looper is amazing.
So I don't know what the fuck happened. Like I literally think Disney, even though a lot of the blame is attributed to him, and I don't think he's blameless, I think Disney is still a big part of the reason why that movie is such ass.
Like, yeah, probably.
I mean, I could get into so many things about it. Like just like it's weird, childish like ideologies about the world, and the fact that they just butcher Luke. He's not even remotely the same character as anyone's used to.
That wasn't the thing that bothered me the most, but just looking back on that movie, I was like, wait a minute, remember that first fight scene at the very beginning of the movie, and that girl is like dropping the bombs on like the bad guys, and the
bombs fall in space even though there's no gravity in space.
Yeah, I was like, what? And they don't even have any, like, all you would have to do is put like a little rocket on it. Yeah. But it's like, wait, where the fuck is this gravity coming from?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Like that whole sequence was based on gravity because like there was that remote control thing that fell down or something, remember?
The movie almost feels like what I felt like the first time I tried to watch Phantom Menace. And the thing is, even though I don't really like Phantom Menace, I came around on the prequels, and now I'm a prequel defender.
Me too.
As you probably know, those. Because like the prequels, as much as they're a little ditzy, and there are definitely hilarious moments in there. Like I'm not going to deny it.
Yeah,
like
Jar Jar,
unintentionally hilarious. Jar Jar is just unintentionally insufferable. He's not even funny.
Yeah.
But like there's still so many great ideas in there, and I think it still comes together into a very ambitious, interesting project. But like with The Last Jedi, when I was watching it, I was getting like Phantom Menace flashbacks because I still didn't like Phantom Menace at the time I watched it. These movies being bad is part of what made me come around. And I was watching it, and like, it's like there were all these scenes happening, but they weren't like connecting together in any kind of satisfying way. Like it felt like I was watching like a broken movie almost, which is a little bit of foreshadowing for Rise of Skywalker, because that's even worse. But like with The Last Jedi, it's like there was this casino subplot that went nowhere and just meant nothing.
Oh, that was so bad.
I know.
So
like,
bad.
What was the
whole
point
casino
of that?
subplot? And then it's like we met Benicio del Toro, and I guess he betrayed us.
I guess so.
Like it just didn't do anything.
There's like porgs that are clearly only there to sell toys, and they're like not funny or cute at all. Yeah,
I wonder what it has on Metacritic. I'm gonna look it up.
But to be fair, even The Last Jedi, as much as I don't like it, as you can very plainly tell, and I didn't like it, like from 15 minutes into the movie, I wanted to like, I was cringing into oblivion, especially at the scene when Leia flies into the ship, a JPEG of Carrie Fisher flies into the ship, like whatever the hell.
So I'm just looking. It's one of these weird ones where on Metacritic, Last Jedi has 84 from the critics and 4.3 from the fans.
Yeah, no,
and it's like
it's same on Rotten Tomatoes. It's like 90 something from the fans, and it's like
how does 40%
from the. It's that is a more recent phenomenon where we didn't see that much throughout history until recently, where there's like these movies that the critics love for like I think being subversive in a lot of cases, and the fans hate it for not being a good movie. And like
Rise of Skywalker it's closer. It's like 5.3 from the critics and 4.6 from the fans.
You know what's funny about Rise of Skywalker? On Rotten Tomatoes, the fan rating was super high before the movie came out from like Star Wars fans that spammed it. The movie came out, it started shooting down incredibly quickly. It went to 86%, got suspiciously stuck there at 86, and it hasn't moved since.
Really?
From like the minute, like basically the minute the film came out, it just froze at 86, and it hasn't moved even 1% since. That's
there's
that
all
seems
kinds
legit.
of corruption going on.
Rotten Tomatoes actually like sold out like they weren't nearly this bad even a few years ago, but like same thing with the new Doctor Who season, which everyone hated. Like they just kept deleting the audience score, which was like 10%. They just deleted it over and over again, and it would and like every time they deleted it, ironically,
10%.
what all they achieved was deleting like the reviews of the people that liked it, and the people that were spamming it with low reviews to try to keep it low came back in greater numbers each time they deleted it. So all they did was lower it.
It's the Streisand effect, right?
Yeah, the Streisand effect, the same thing that happened with Xi Jinping when he tried to censor Winnie the Pooh, and now everyone calls him Winnie the Pooh like worldwide. Like But anyways, getting back to Rise of Skywalker, I was going to say, at least with The Last Jedi, it kind of comes together as a cohesive movie ultimately when I look back at it, even though there's all this useless shit like the casino and that the Poe subplot with the mutiny stuff. Like, I don't know exactly what they were going for.
Yeah.
At least there were interesting ideas there, and there were some pretty awesome moments there. Like, I don't really like them killing Snoke ultimately for the story, but like it was a pretty damn cool moment when Snoke dies and then Rey teams up with Adam Driver. I forgot the name of his character already.
Kylo Ren.
Kylo Ren, yeah, sorry. Rey teams up with Kylo and they fight off all the guards. That was a pretty damn awesome
That was
moment.
a cool scene.
And the part when purple hair lady like goes light speed into the First Order ships, that was awesome too. Doesn't make that much sense, because if people could have done that all along, you'd think the people would be like weaponizing that, and they'd be, instead of shooting laser at each other, they'd shoot light speed weapons that would be much more devastating.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought.
It's a plot hole, but it's still a cool moment, like at least like it's directed well, thanks to Rian Johnson. But then we get into Rise of Skywalker, and that is a broken movie if I've ever seen one. Jesus
Where are you
Christ.
going with this?
Like, it's just it like ticks the boxes for like what execs think like a movie should be, but it doesn't actually like hit on a single thing that any movie needs to hit on to like feel like a satisfying experience when you're walking out, especially like an action adventure movie. So like they bring back Palpatine in like one of the worst scenes I've ever seen in a Star Wars movie, which feels like a trailer. And you find out
which scene?
The very opening scene of the movie when like Kylo goes to this planet, which like has never been mentioned before in the trilogy.
Yeah.
And he meets Palpatine, and you find out that Palpatine just has like 1 billion Star Destroyers just hidden away on this planet. Keep in mind, like the Empire in the original trilogy only had like, I think like less than 10 like Star Destroyers, yeah. And the Emperor just has like 1,000. Where did he get them from? Like, how did he build
where's he getting
these?
all this labor from?
I don't know. We never know. Why is he even on this planet? I don't know. Because he is. Because Disney says so. So like he just it's at this moment that I realized that this movie was dedicated to undoing everything The Last Jedi did, because The Last Jedi failed with fans and Disney panicked.
Right.
And because they didn't plan out the trilogy, they're like, okay, undo The Last Jedi. So like basically the whole second movie of the trilogy doesn't matter. So the third movie basically suddenly has to be like the second movie and the third movie, which
that's true, right?
Turns it into a total, not only makes The Last Jedi even more pointless in hindsight, but like it puts all this pressure on the Rise of Skywalker, and it just does not deliver at all. Like, for instance, Rose is like a main character in The Last Jedi, but people didn't like her, so she just gets jettisoned from the plot. She has like 1 minute of screen time in The Last Jedi. It's insane. She only has like 2 lines. She has less lines than like some like random backup like engineer dude does. Carrie Fisher wasn't even alive, and she got like 5 times as much screen time and lines as Rose did.
Yeah.
Like,
so true. No, it was super unsatisfying. And then like the Emperor had that huge badass fleet, and like they didn't even have a cool space battle. And like the big battle at the end was fucking lame.
I know, it was just CGI getting thrown at you. And all,
they just really shit the bed.
Yeah, and like I said, the movie is just determined to undo The Last Jedi, even the most petty of ways. So, like, for example, like in The Last Jedi, Kylo destroys his helmet. So at the beginning of Rise of Skywalker, he makes a new helmet, which looks exactly like his old helmet. In fact, I think he just repairs the old helmet from the pieces. In The Last Jedi, it's described that Rey's parents were nobodies, and she's not a traditional hero. She's just sort of an everyman, and the only reason she's where she is through her own like determination and skill, which I kind of liked actually. And then in Rise of Skywalker, they're like, actually, no, she's a Palpatine. Her parents, at least her grandfather, is one of the most important and most powerful people in the universe. So like, it's just like determined to contradict and undo The Last Jedi everywhere it possibly can. And even in bringing back like Palpatine, it's like The Last Jedi was trying to get rid of having an emperor-like villain by killing Snoke. So then they have to bring back Palpatine instantly to basically put another person into that position and just undo what killing Snoke was trying to achieve.
That was a stretch. That was a stretch. And just like Palpatine was such a classic villain. I just feel like they did him dirty, you know?
They didn't just do him dirty, they did Anakin dirty, because it ruins Anakin's arc. Because Anakin was the chosen one in the prequels. You don't know... They didn't know why. Then Anakin turns dark, and like...
Yeah.
Let's just pretend someone's watching the movies. They're watching the prequels before the original trilogy. So they'd be like, why is he the chosen one if he's evil and he's Darth Vader now?
Right.
Well, the reason is because he kills the Emperor. Except that he didn't actually kill the Emperor, because Palpatine just came back in Rise of Skywalker, so now him being the chosen one makes no goddamn sense, and his sacrifice is pointless.
Yeah.
So, like, congratulations, Disney. You, like, ruined the Return of the Jedi, the point of the end of that movie.
That's a great point.
You know, the original George Lucas plan for a sequel trilogy wasn't to just, like, repeat the idea of having, like, an empire and, like, a Darth Vader figure, but the antagonists were going to be beings that attacked the Force in general. Not just like the dark side of the Force attacking the light side of the Force, but the entire Force, light and dark, both under attack from these beings that like I think they like fed off of the Force itself. So like
that's a pretty
I think
cool
it would have
idea.
rendered I think the idea is it would have rendered Jedi and Sith powerless, and Jedi and Sith would have had to work together. That would have been so much cooler than the absolute really cool bullshit that we got.
Oh my god, like, that would have been way cooler, and it just would have been different, you know. Like it would just feel like a new thing.
Yeah, each trilogy would be different if that was the case.
Yeah, instead of just like a shitty remake of. The
there's the prequels, the original trilogy, and the bad version of the original trilogy with better CGI, which is what the sequels are. Yeah. It's quite disappointing. The thing is, I didn't even hate The Force Awakens when I first watched it.
No, me neither, actually. I was like, they're kind of setting it up, like, you know, it seems chill.
Yeah, but like the just setup movie was somehow the best of the three. By a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not even that great.
Yeah. No. Did you see the new Mandalorian thing?
No, I've only seen the big part of the first season.
It's good. They've done a good job with it. Way better than the movies.
Oh yeah, from what I saw of the show, it was like the movies were embarrassing in comparison. Like all of the movies, including the spin-off movies, are worse than the Mandalorian from what I've seen of the Mandalorian. Like the Han Solo one and the Rogue One. Rogue One is actually probably my favorite of the Disney like Star Wars movies, and I don't even love that one. Like I don't even like it. Like
that's
that
what people seem to say. That seems to be kind of the consensus, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a shame. And Disney's just gonna keep swallowing up more and more like companies, and everything's gonna get like Disneyfied. Like I think 8 out of the 10 highest grossing movies in 2019 were all Disney.
Whoa.
Something terrifying like that.
Well, because it just makes more space for
they own Star Wars, they own
shit.
Marvel, they own Pixar, they own their own movies. It's like they own all the biggest IPs.
Wow. Yeah, like Mulan. Did you see that?
It's so fucking bad.
I know.
It's so bad. These Disney remakes just get worse and worse.
Yeah.
Like,
it's impressive.
Like the
But
Lion...
they're making money, so...
I thought they couldn't get worse than the Lion King one and the Aladdin one. I thought that was like the bottom. In fact,
I didn't even see those.
I'm planning on making a video essay on the Disney remakes. I haven't even sat through the entire Aladdin remake. I think I have to if I'm going to make a video on it.
Isn't that with Will Smith as the genie?
Yeah, it is.
Wow. How much do you think he got paid for that?
Like fucking $10 billion. I don't know. They all get paid obscene amounts to like... Will Smith, isn't he like a YouTuber now?
Will Smith?
Yeah, he's like a YouTube... Like, go on YouTube. He has a YouTube channel. He posts like semi-regularly. Same with Jack Black.
Really?
Jack Black like became a YouTuber too. But Jack Black's YouTube channel is actually good. Like, no offense, Will Smith. Like, I love you, Will Smith, and like, you know, I love you on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and stuff. But like, you gotta stop selling out to the corporations, my dude. He's
got 9 million subscribers
every week. I didn't even realize he uploads that much. He's like a full-time YouTuber.
Wow.
And he must make a shit ton of money off these videos because these all get a lot of... He gets like almost PewDiePie views.
Wow. Well, yeah, because he's already a fucking superstar.
That's the thing. Because the thing about becoming big on YouTube is the real struggle is getting exposure. But if you already have a shit ton of exposure, people will watch you pretty much no matter what. So like, if you're already big, you can just break onto the scene.
He looks fucking good, man. He looks like he's barely aged at all since the 90s.
That's what liposuction does.
No, I think he's just really healthy.
Yeah, he might be healthy too. No, like,
I think it's
not impossible.
He works out.
Speaking of PewDiePie,
I saw him doing pull-ups.
Can you imagine getting PewDiePie views? Can you imagine being able to like upload a video of you wiping your ass and I'll get like 5 million views? The dude uploads every day and he doesn't have a single video under 1 million views. I was wrong. Will Smith actually doesn't get views even close to what PewDiePie gets.
No.
Like, goddamn. I'm like, it would be so cool to have that as your job. Just like being a big YouTuber and being able to just upload anything and people will just swarm to it. And you can create like a big buzz.
You'll get like, there.
Yeah. Just by doing like anything, essentially. Like the dude just looks at memes. Like I'm like, not that I'm hating on him though. Like, but like all I'm saying is,
must be nice.
It must be nice to be able to just look at memes and get that much of a viewership off of it. That's like the dream job right there.
Yeah. What else? What else you want to talk about?
Well, if you wanna go back into the sort of philosophy bubble that we were talking about before, instead of talking about philosophers themselves, we can talk about some like philosophy concepts such as like metaphysics, which we sort of dipped our toes into a tiny little bit, or like logic.
Yeah, whatever, man.
The thing that interested me like the most that I learned was probably the metaphysics of time, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but like there are two sort of series of time, like within the metaphysical world, and that's the A series of time and the B series of time. Mm-hmm. And the A series is essentially sort of probably how most people think about time by default, which is that time constantly moves forwards, and like there's a past, present, and future, and the future constantly moves towards the past, and the past moves further into the past, and the present is like where we are. But the B series, which is probably what I subscribe to more, is the theory of time that states that there's no real like movement through time, but truthfully there's they're just moments that only make sense relative to other moments. So like there's one moment that's after another moment, or one moment that's before another moment, but there's no like past, present, and future all like skating around, like constantly moving.
So would that be kind of like saying there is no time as such, like just, I don't know if as such would be the right thing to say, but no time just by itself out there somewhere, and it's just the fact that since things are changing, that's what we call time, kind of thing.
For the B series?
Well, yeah, does that fit in with what you're saying or no?
Well, can you describe that again?
Okay, so like, sure. Yeah, so just, so if everything where I am right now is like not moving at all and there's no change whatsoever, I would be like, oh, I'm frozen in time or something, right? But then if like, because think about if everything in the universe just stopped moving completely.
Uh-huh.
That would be, that's kind. Then that means there's no time, right? I mean, it couldn't happen, but like, but you could think about it that way, and then if that's the case, then the only thing time is just physical change.
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean now. Well, the B series versus the A series kind of gets into that, and like what constitutes change in time, and whether change is just sort of like things physically moving. And there are certain people that argue for the concept that change exists within space itself. This is sort of more of a B series argument, where like maybe part of like a piece of bread is hot, like you put in the microwave and it doesn't cook evenly, so part of it is hot. Mm-hmm. But if you move up the piece of bread, it sort of gets colder, and that's sort of a change within space rather than within like time. But there's people who argue against that and say that that's a meaningless change because like there's nothing truly linking the cold and hot parts of the bread together other than you just doing it in your mind. It's just sort of atoms. Some of them over here happen to be colder, some of them over here happen to be hotter, but there's not like a change connecting them. They just happen to be hotter here or colder there, and change can only exist within time, sort of within motion. So I guess if everything stopped, if everything froze, obviously we wouldn't have a chance to contemplate what was happening because we'd be frozen in time. But like according to the A series, that would be time stopping. According to the B series, that would just sort of be like, I guess, the final moment on the chain, or I'm not sure exactly what you describe that as. But that wouldn't really be time stopping according to the B series, because time doesn't really move at all according to the B series, or at least
okay. So
not
that's
in
like
the
the
traditional
main
sense
idea
we think
behind
of it
this
as.
B series thing is
A
that
little bit.
Time
Yeah,
doesn't
kind
move?
of.
Interesting.
Sort of that, like, well, there are people that see, like Einstein, for example, claimed that time is an illusion. And like back when I was a kid, I always like thought, I was like, how can time not be an illusion? Because like when I thought about it, I'd be like, how can the moment we're in not be the moment we're in, like in 3 seconds from now or something? What happened to the moment 3 seconds ago? Did that just get deleted from existence, or does that still exist?
I think it's just impermanence, right? Like it's just the constant impermanence is a fundamental feature of reality. And so if you have impermanence, time is just kind of like however you choose to kind of like locate yourself within the impermanence.
But like what happens to the past? Like once the past is no longer the moment we're in, like where does it go?
That's interesting.
That's the thing. It can only exist or not exist. It can't like be both. And clearly it doesn't seem to exist. So like,
oh, I see. Yeah. That reminds me of something from you're going to get to St. Augustine soon. He was like a great philosopher, but also a great kind of like theologian, right?
Yeah, one of my friends actually named himself after he like renamed himself Augustine after partly after St. Augustine.
Yeah, he's amazing. And like Confessions by him, it's like an autobiography, and it's the first known autobiography ever. And he talks about like how he went through all these philosophical ideas and eventually became a Christian and all this stuff. But he talks about time, and it's like, like you were just saying, the past doesn't exist because, you can't like go to it. You can look at a picture, but it's like that's this artifact. Like you're not actually like you kind of go to the past mostly in your own mind, which is kind
but
of
like it's not real.
memories and images, and like it's not the actual thing. It's like a reproduction, right?
That's the thing. The way I've always thought about it, even like back when I was a kid, and sort of kind of what the B series is getting at is those moments all exist like independently of us. We inhabit one moment, but all the moments still exist. And that's sort of the logical thing I think about. Like basically, if the moment I'm in the present exists right now, in 3 seconds from now, it can't not exist because it existed. Because I know that it existed because I was just in it. So where did it go?
Okay.
That it's sort of hard to explain, but like the moment we're in right now, like it clearly is happening, right? This is real. This exists.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, wait 1 second, and now like where is that? Like, does it not exist? Well, it can't not exist because we were just in it. We know that it exists, like there, in time. So clearly it still exists somewhere, but we can't access it. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, or it's just gone, like it's just recycled into.
Well,
the
that's
next
an
moment.
A series way of looking at it, where we're constantly moving forward. I don't really subscribe to that personally, but like you can think about it that way if you want.
But yeah, so Augustine's saying like this is I don't know if this would be what you're calling the A series or B series or whatever, but he says, you know, the past doesn't exist in the sense, you know, you can't go there, you can't look at it, you can't like hold on to it in any way. And the same thing applies to the future. And the present moment is so quick that it's basically infinitesimally small, you know, because it's kind of just the razor's edge between the past and the future, and the moment is so fleeting that the present, you know, when you think about the present, you might think this like current minute or this current even second,
but it's smaller than that. It's infinitely small.
Yeah, it's like infinitely small. So in that sense, like it's almost like the present doesn't really exist either, because it's so small, that it can't really contain even. You can't even really fully be aware of it. Like it's almost more finely ground than your perception itself.
Well, that's one argument I personally kind of have against the more sort of A series linear way of looking at it. And also there are a lot of people that subscribe to the A series who believe that the past and the future still exist, even though they believe that it like moves sort of forwards. But like I would argue that that's kind of, there's sort of a logical issue there in that like if it's constantly moving forward and there's this like shift to it, then and what exists only exists within the present, then clearly the stuff that has already happened can't still exist anymore because it's not in the present. That's based on the A series, the only thing that determines existence. And also what we're just talking about, like the present is infinitely small. Like it's not a second, it's not a nanosecond, it's smaller than that. Like if time moves, do we imagine it animated almost like frames of a film or an animation? Like 24 frames per second or whatever, because that can't be what it is, because time can't be like divided like frames in a film. It's like it just sort of flows, is the idea. It's like infinitely, it just sort of constantly moves forward, but like how do you divide it small enough to get to one single moment in time? You can't.
I do think that you can sort of, through say meditation or something like that, kind of zoom in on your own awareness of the passage of time to the point where you kind of almost escape from time, in the sense that your awareness is kind of moving faster than your perception of the flow of time, you know, and you kind of enter this like more, this gets more into spirituality, but you know, like your God is eternal outside of time, and you're kind of accessing that space. Yeah.
Well, what I was gonna say about sort of time being like flowing as opposed to like being like frames, like animated, is I was gonna say if time moves from the future becomes the past, or the future becomes the present, then the past, then like how does one moment in time reach another? Because like if you can divide it into moments, then that would imply that one moment goes to another moment, to another moment, to another moment. Like when you're animating something, you're flipping through pages. But again, like I said, you can never divide it small enough. So like how do you make it from one moment to the next moment when you can always divide further? And that's sort of there's a similar actually paradox with space as opposed to time, where like
Zeno's paradox.
Yes, Zeno's paradox, where people ask how does one object in space ever move? Let's actually say there's someone running towards a finish line, and they make it halfway towards the finish line. But now the new halfway point is closer to the finish line. They make it halfway to that halfway point, which is a quarter of the original distance. And then there's a new halfway point, and you can always divide more and more the closer they get. And the divisions never stop. So
Right.
how do they ever actually reach it?
There's some solutions for that, aren't there? Some pretty good solutions.
I think there are. I think that's easier to solve than time one. Because like I said, I sort of subscribe to the B series, but the Zeno's paradox might just be a paradox of language and how we think about math. It might not be a real paradox. It's kind of hard to say.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I just all this stuff fascinates me in general. There's more stuff. There's more metaphysical stuff we can talk about than just time. Like for instance, there's also another thing I looked into a lot is the concept of a universal within the universe. So a group that are known as the realists sort of believe that a universal is just a concept that is innate within the universe. For example, like I'm looking at this thing of Skittles, which is sitting near me, and it's a red package. So like a universal entity would be the entity of redness, and that just sort of exists within the universe. So like if I look at my wallet, which is also red, it has the same universal redness property as the Skittles. So that's the belief that there's just an inherent red property. But there's a group of people called the nominalists who believe that property does not exist. And we can say that the red property of the Skittles does indeed look similar to this red property of this wallet, but there's nothing in space connecting them at all. They just look similar to us.
Right.
And more specifically, there's a group of people who I don't remember exactly what they're called, but who believe that like universals exist within the human brain. So they're a little bit closer to realists than a nominalist who believes there's no universals. They believe that within the human brain, we definitely interpret redness as existing within multiple objects, but within the universe, it does not exist because like humans interpret light in a certain way, and our brains interpret such things in such a way, but we don't know what anything actually looks like beyond our brains. So basically, they make the argument that universals are real to us, but not anywhere else, not beyond the limits of our brains. So I don't know which one of those you would agree with the most.
It's interesting. I mean, they both make good points because, I mean, I was just thinking about the Platonic forms, right? And he's trying to...
Yeah, Plato kind of got into that a little bit too.
Right, just kind of saying there is this idea out there. That's an interesting one. I feel
Plato
like...
was kind of a realist, to be honest. He kind of seemed to believe...
Yeah, I mean, yeah, what you were calling the nominalist idea, it kind of makes sense in the sense, like, yeah, no two shades of red are the same, and
there's technically it will always be slightly different too. That's another part of it.
Yeah, but then at the same time, like, everything we experience and philosophize about happens inside your mind, and it's natural for us to kind of make these categories, right? So whether it exists out there or it's just useful, like it definitely exists to us.
That's the thing. I think I would subscribe to the group of people like I'm probably closer to a nominalist than a realist, but I would say clearly universals exist within the human mind, because otherwise we wouldn't have a concept of red or a concept of green or a concept of blue or a concept of big or a concept of small. Like that, just the existence of those words and concepts proves that we have observed them and identified the pattern between similar objects. So
it's like the ability to abstract like a property away from any specific instantiation of it. I would agree that doesn't exist objectively within the universe, which puts me closer to a nominalist than a realist. Right. It's not like there's a library somewhere with all of these universals in it, right? But it's part of our sort of collective consciousness or something.
Yeah. And what's interesting, another metaphysical idea, which we can transition into quite nicely from here, is the idea that, for an example, using color as an example again, that people, no one actually sees color the same way as everyone else. So like what I see as red, you might see as green. But we could never know that, because the words that we learned to associate with each color will just be the color that we see in our heads, and we can't actually communicate that. So if you learned that green is red, then you would call it red, and I would never know that you're actually thinking about green. So that's sort of that's a way that we could argue that universals might not even exist within the human collective, but just each individual mind is like a different set of universals based on how people learn.
But then that one would just kind of, you wouldn't be able to know with colors because there's no consequences to not calling colors the same things. But there's got to be some kind of other universal where if our concepts of it weren't lining up, then there would be some negative consequence to that, right? I don't know what an example would be, but
I mean, we seem to be doing okay right now. We seem to be able to communicate with each other as if we're all perceiving the same things generally.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing that we know doesn't line up between humans is opinions. Like humans don't agree on what's good or bad. And we don't know where. I think that the idea is that just comes from how our brains are formed and like what we've associated with liking and not liking. But we don't know if that has anything to do with us perceiving things differently, just in general. So like, for example, maybe there's this one song and certain people might perceive the melodies and harmonies as sounding better in their heads based on how their ears are formed than someone else might, who might have ears that make it sound a lot more like tinny and shitty and grating, that we don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Because the same theory could go for sounds instead of colors. Like maybe a certain sound, like what I'm hearing right now, maybe everything you hear is like much more high pitched, but I wouldn't know that because that's what you're used to and such.
Right.
So yeah, until we somehow manage to like tap into each other's brains, like watching a live stream of someone like gaming, we don't really know.
Yeah, but we get by well enough.
My assumption is that people probably see stuff generally the same. I don't know that. That's my guess, but I think that
that would be my
probably
guess.
Are little differences.
Yeah, like some people are colorblind or like half colorblind.
That's the thing. People who are colorblind, their perception is different enough that it affects their communication, so that we as a world know. So there might be different types of like colorblindness that we don't know about, because like they still perceive all colors, they just perceive them differently.
Yeah.
So it doesn't affect their communication, so they'll never know that they're colorblind, and the world will. I might see colors differently than everyone else does, and I'll never know. You might be
special.
Yeah, I'm a special boy.
Yeah, no, I think that's great that you're getting into all that stuff. The Neoplatonic stuff is really interesting. Because you kind of get to the end of Greek philosophy, so-called, and you get into more Christian stuff, but But it's interesting, the parallels and the people who kind of synthesize it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've also looked
like
into
Augustine was a Neoplatonic kind of guy, and that was almost like his bridge to Christianity. Because they're quite similar in some ways.
Well, I've also looked into a lot of political philosophy, and that sort of stretches. It gets richer the later you go, kind of, because the more recent you get, the more political philosophers
there's just more of it.
Yeah,
and
I mean, I think one of the most. I didn't know much about John Locke until I studied him in greater detail, but goddamn, the dude had so much influence on the modern world. He basically...
I should read some of his stuff.
Yeah, he basically inspired not just like libertarianism, but like capitalism. It's sort of his design in many ways.
Was that like through his influence on the American founding fathers?
Yeah, he had huge influence on the American founding fathers and how they wrote the Constitution. And obviously, America spread capitalist and, to a great extent, libertarian ideas around the world, which came, or at least were heavily, heavily influenced by him. Or at least that was true when the U.S. wasn't backing fascist dictatorships all over the place. So the world would be a very different place without him. I think he might be one of the most influential political philosophers ever, actually. For better or for worse. Kind of depends on how you look at it. But he basically saw private property as being the most important thing that must be protected at all costs for a nation to be civilized, as opposed to being, existing within a state of nature, not actually being
that is a very modern
society.
Idea.
Well, Marx is even more modern than Locke. He's like the most recent huge new political philosophical idea is sort of communism and socialism, which is kind of reactionary to capitalism, actually.
Right.
Which it's sort of like anti-capitalism. It's like private property, not all of it, but most of it, especially like the idea of capital, has to be abolished so that people can't hoard wealth and such.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing. And the thing about communism, what happens is to establish a communism, this is what Marx wrote about, you have to have sort of this temporary state, which ironically is actually like a one-party system, and it's authoritarian, which is not the end goal. The end goal is no government. But what happens is it keeps getting stuck on that temporary one-party state, because they never actually make it to like the no government communism that is the stated objective. They just sort of...
Well,
that's
look,
what
it's
happens.
like if people... That's an interesting point. And if people are so enamored with communism, they should just go to a great free country like Canada or America and just like buy some land and just try it out. Just try it out.
Well, when you say
with people who want to do it, and just
when
like
you
have
say
your
that,
own little.
How would people try it out, like by themselves, like in the wilderness?
Just go try to farm and stuff, and just good luck.
Well, is that what communism is? Just like farming in the...
Well, I'm just saying, like, you could do it. It's like, if you think it's so great, then you should be trying it. Like, your process should be like, hey, look at how great it is. Like, we made it work on a small scale, and now let's try to slowly like scale it up and keep it working well, rather than like, let's take over this country and force everybody into our new crazy idea. You know what I mean? Like,
well, debatably,
like
you could argue that that's every ideology forces itself upon. Like, even if it's like an ideology that works out super well, you could make the argument that it's still sort of coming in and forcing it upon everyone that exists within it. That's actually one kind of issue with how the world is set up, in that a country obviously has to pick an ideology and stick with it, but a country also has certain culture and linguistic aspects to its identity. So there might be someone that only speaks like Serbian or something, and they really like the culture of Serbia, but they hate the ideology of the Serbian government, so they're stuck living in a country that they hate the government of. It would be great if it was almost like a level selector in a video game where everyone like spoke the same language and culture was generally shared, so that people could just move to the country that they wanted to live in just based on the ideology. That would be pretty sweet. But that's not how it works, unfortunately.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I mean, like, I guess every ideology is forced. Like, I guess if you went back to the American Revolution and you, like, surveyed every single potential citizen, you know, a lot of them would agree, and some of them would say, oh, I'd rather do it this way, I'd rather do it that way. But basically, that's why you need to have freedom be the main thing of whatever political philosophy it is. It's just, you know, that, I mean, obviously I'm biased because of, you know, when and where I am, but, you know, it's like you got to protect people's rights and all that good stuff and people's freedom, and, you know, and then people can kind of have the freedom to live the way they want, and maybe the government, you know, it's like it shouldn't be too much in people's lives. So if people want to do things differently, great. It doesn't have to be that, you know, you don't need a government to live the way you want necessarily.
Well, would you agree with me that, let's say theoretically, if humans in the future are like these genetically modified creatures, and that's a whole different, by the way, like can of worms, genetic modification. Yeah, that's some shit that freaks me out. But let's just put that the downsides of it down and just pretend they don't exist and pretend it's inevitable for now. So let's say humans are in the future like these genetically modified, like perfect creatures who are sort of past pettiness and like corruption. Would you agree with me that in that case, communism actually would work, and in that case would be the best system?
I would say no, because communism doesn't give people freedom.
Well, I mean, theoretically, I mean, the problem with communism, which I stated, is that it sort of gets stuck in, it doesn't account for current human nature, and it kind of gets stuck in this corrupt one-party system where the government basically can do whatever they want to the people. But like I said, if the rulers were like perfect and the people living in the system were perfect and they didn't take advantage of it, how would that not be the best system? Because that would be the most quick and efficient system, because the government could just do whatever they want.
They're never going to be
quickly.
Perfect. Like, human nature is human nature. You're not going to, you wouldn't want to engineer away human nature.
That's the thing. Well, now we're getting into the genetic modification shit, which like freaks me out about the idea of humans like becoming sort of like husks of themselves in the future.
Yeah, that is kind of creepy, eh?
Yeah, and it feels a little bit like a slippery slope too.
Yeah.
And the thing, speaking of communism, makes me think of the CCP, you know, China. And China's kind of pushing that shit. They're like doing all these experiments with genetic modification. And as long as one country does it, it pushes all of humanity closer to it. Like, China's doing shit with like designer babies who have like perfect genes, like at birth. Like, that's kind of spooky.
Yeah, it's kind of inevitable though. So you just hope that, you know, I think it has to be inevitable because you want lots of people doing it. So like the good people, so at least, you know, there's some people with the best intentions doing it and not just the evil people.
I don't think humanity is likely to throw away core tenets of humanity, such as like emotion and just sort of how we look in general with like two eyes and like a mouth. And I think humans are very attached to that, and even though we'll have the technology to get rid of it one day, I doubt that we'll get rid of those core traits and emotions and, you know, pleasure and the sex and such. I doubt that that's going anywhere. But at the same time, like, it is dangerous to like mess with the building blocks of humanity and DNA, and it could lead to some very spooky consequences. And theoretically,
you just got
like, give us enough time, like we might get closer and closer and closer to being beings who are more emotionless, more sort of practical as opposed to human, and sort of closer and closer to machines as opposed to living things. And the thing is, a machine could never understand why you'd want to be human as opposed to a machine, because humans are less efficient. And a machine would probably only see efficiency as being, and intelligence, like computer intelligence, as being the only thing that matters. They wouldn't understand like the value to life, like as a human with emotions and like dreams and wishes and such.
Yeah.
So I agree that like it's kind of inevitable. So we have to make sure that it's the power's in the right hands, and I would not say that the CCP is the right hands.
Nope. I would have to agree with you on that one.
So the thing
Sketchy
is,
as
like,
fuck.
does the Western world work on genetic modification too to catch up to China? Or do we not? Because that would just speed up the process hugely. It's like, of course, China has to be pushing us to this.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying, like, you have to do it, even if you're kind of sketched out by it. You have to keep fighting forward with it because, you know, I would feel way better, even if it was still a bit sketchy, if, say, like, America was at the absolute cutting edge of that. I'm sure, you know, I would feel much better than China, you know, just because America is a more free country. And
America
they won't
still has just this plethora of issues right now, and I think freedom in the Western world is being tested right now. I don't want to get too deep though. I don't want to get too deep.
We can save that for next time. We're at pretty much 2 hours, so I don't know. Maybe let's wrap it up soon because I want to get some dinner here.
I think we talked about a lot of damn interesting stuff here today.
Yeah, we did good. We did. We'll have to do this again soon.
Yeah. Maybe you can come on again when my co-hosts are on. If we talked about politics, especially Yoshi, it'd probably be a little spicier of a conversation. I'll just say that.
Why? He's like a communist?